Greetings and salutations. My name is Don Dillard. I am a professor of philosophy, which means, amongst other things, that I'm probably not qualified or sophisticated enough to make YouTube videos. But nevertheless, here is a very low production video which covers the question, are you free to be a Valentine? Let's get started. First, here is what I'm not going to talk about in this video: the history of Valentine's Day. You can Google that for yourselves, and if you're careful, cobble together a fairly reliable picture of its history. If you do, strap in, because the history of Valentine's Day is pretty dark. Okay, with that preface out of the way, I want to talk about the modern idea of a Valentine. In particular, what it means to be a Valentine. And here we can draw a distinction between what a Valentine ought to be, which is to say the ideal, and what being a Valentine actually is, which is to say a Valentine in practice. Let's start with the ideal. The ideal of being a Valentine means, amongst other things, engaging in romantic activities or being a paragon of romantic virtue. Romantic activities include everything from the traditional giving of flowering candies to grand gestures involving expensive jewelry or employing the element of surprise for dramatic emotional effect, such as by blindfolding your beloved into a stage scene with flower petals, candle lighting, Barry Manilow, and an elaborate dinner. If the gesture is grand enough, you can become a paragon of romantic virtue, which is to say, a person who embodies the idea of romance, such as Romeo and Juliet, or even a hopeless romantic, such as Pepe Le Pew. Now let's touch on what it tends to mean to be a Valentine's in practice. In practice, you have, on the one hand, the anxiety one feels in the anticipation of romantic gifts. Will you or will you not receive those flowers and candies? And the deep disappointment one might feel if no romantic gestures are forthcoming. And on the other hand, you have the great pressure to provide that romantic gesture, the anxiety about whether or not the romantic gesture was sufficient. Is your gift enough to express your devotion, or is it too much and for the wrong person? And the possible disappointment one feels if the romantic gesture is spurned or rejected. And all of this is without accounting for the underlying feeling of shame that is salient through all of the Valentine's Day activities. One is shamed for not providing a romantic gesture, and one is shamed even for not receiving a romantic gesture. Nothing is worse than being the one person in the office who watches a parade of flowers and gifts go by, but nothing for oneself, while being treated as an object of pity by those same coworkers. Well, perhaps one thing is worse. Perhaps you did provide a romantic gesture, but your motivations are called into question with the inescapable logic that you only made the gesture because you were obliged to do it, and not because you wanted to do it. After all, if you really love someone, should you need a holiday to tell you to do it? Shouldn't you do it because you love the person and for no other reason? But how do you prove it? How do you prove that you're doing it for love and not for the holiday when you're doing it on the holiday? To be fair, the preceding is arguably a sour grapes kind of narrative about Valentine's Day. But there is a philosophical argument to be made for the thought that socially valuable activities should be free from coercion. This is especially true if social activities are valuable precisely because they are performed out of free will. If people are performing these relevant activities out of shame, then that undermines the freedom component of value we have attached to those activities. After all, if you discovered that your significant other only made some grand gesture because your mother paid him or her a hefty fee to do it, then that undermines the activity itself. Okay, that's it for now. Thank you for listening, and until next time, take care.